Gather round, the fire has woken. The rivers, the mountains, and the winds have spoken. They're calling out a warning that the bond has been broken. We need to leave the underground and go into the great wide open. 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 Hear me now, a song is coming. It's breaking out after years of humming. What it's about will be told by the strings boldly strumming. But it can't do without your heart. Your heartbeat drumming. Your heartbeat drumming. Your heartbeat drumming. Your heartbeat drumming. Yeah.
Staat deze aan? Ja. Welkom ook namens Milieudefensie bij dit evenement over de People Powered Movement versus Shell. Mijn naam is Noor Blokhuis en ik werk bij Milieudefensie als diversiteitsorganizer. En ik ga jullie iets vertellen over hoe dit project tot stand is gekomen. 2020 is een belangrijk jaar voor Milieudefensie. Een spannend jaar. We hebben dit jaar 2 rechtszaken tegen Shell lopen. En we zijn niet de enige. Wereldwijd worden er vele rechtszaken tegen Shell gevoerd. En binnen Nederland heeft ook Amnesty op dit moment een rechtszaak tegen Shell lopen. De eerste rechtszaak van Milieudefensie gaat tegen Shell in Nigeria. En in Nigeria is het al jarenlang zo dat er oliepijpleidingen lekken. Die lekken olie het land op van onder andere de Ogoni people die daar in de Nigerdelta in het zuiden wonen. En dat heeft desastreuze gevolgen voor hen en voor hun levens en voor het land waarop zij wonen. En 12 jaar geleden zijn we een rechtszaak begonnen samen met 4 eisers. Dat zijn 4 Nigeriaanse boeren die voor de Nederlandse rechter hun gelijk wilden halen. Ik zal hun namen voorlezen. Het zijn Erik Do, Elder Friday Alfred Akpa, Chief Fidelis A. Uguru en Alali Efangi, die intussen overleden is en die dus de rechtvaardigheid en de uitspraak niet heeft mogen meemaken. De eis is eigenlijk heel simpel. Shell, ruim die olie op. Zorg dat het land weer schoon is, te bewonen is, te bebouwen is. En betaal ook een schadevergoeding aan de mensen die daar wonen. Specifiek aan deze 4 boeren. En in oktober waren er 2 zittingsdagen. En we gaan in december horen wat de uitkomst is. En december wordt sowieso een spannende maand. Want er loopt nog een rechtszaak van Milieudefensie tegen Shell. En dat is de klimaatzaak, onder leiding van de advocaat Roger Cox, die ook de Urgenda-zaak tegen de staat heeft gewonnen. Misschien herinneren jullie dit nog wel. Samen met 17.000 Nederlandse mede-eisers klagen we Shell aan voor vervuiling. En houden we Shell verantwoordelijk voor CO2-uitstoot. En de bedoeling is dat Shell daarin verantwoordelijkheid gaat nemen en drastisch maatregelen gaat nemen om te vergroenen. En werken met, of eigenlijk werken tegen Shell, maakt eigenlijk heel erg duidelijk wat klimaatrechtvaardigheid is, climate justice. Dat gaat niet alleen over vergroening en over minder CO2 in de lucht en over bomen en over water en luchtkwaliteit. Maar het gaat ook over mensen en over het herstellen van relaties, over het erkennen van het systeem dat de klimaatcrisis heeft veroorzaakt. En over samen toewerken naar een toekomst waarin dus niet alleen de lucht schoner wordt en de CO2-uitstoot drastisch wordt teruggebracht, maar waarin we ook aan herstel van schade doen. Herstel van schade door mensen onderling en landroof en waar zelfs doden uit zijn gevolgd. Daar gaat de rechtszaak van Amnesty ook over. Dus klimaatrechtvaardigheid gaat niet alleen over groen, maar ook over mensen en mensenrechten. En daarover gaan we vanavond heel veel horen. Veel in het teken van Shell dus dit jaar bij Milieudefensie. En daarom zijn we ook samen gaan zitten met Chihiro Geuzenbroek en Anna Bissila, die samen een expositie hebben gemaakt over het verzet dat al bestaat tegen Shell door de jaren heen en het verzet dat groeit. De expositie begon eigenlijk ergens in mei met een gesprek tussen Chihiro en mijzelf. En is intussen letterlijk een beetje boven jullie hoofd uitgegroeid. We gaan er vanavond een soort sneak preview hebben en het hebben over die jarenlang of eigenlijk een eeuw verzet die ons al voorging. Het verzet tegen Shell groeit en we gaan daar naar luisteren. We gaan luisteren naar Chihiro Geuzenbroek en Anna Bissila. Mag ik jullie naar voren roepen?
Yay. It's so nice to see you. I'm so happy you're here. So yeah, wasn't it nice to open with that music and feel some togetherness in this time of separation and isolation? I think the expo is also kind of reconnecting that we as activists and as creative activists have an understanding that we are together with ancestors of resistance, people who were here before us. So a few words about us. Anna.
So hi, I'm Anna Bissila. I'm 25, from France, and I met Chihiro this year. Now we are organizing a beautiful exhibition together, and this is thanks to us meeting at Code Road.
Yeah, so that was only at the beginning of this year. So this is very, like Noor said, a chance expo that it started talking about a pop-up expo, and I literally thought that it was going to be like 2 party tents outside with like some pictures or something. But I immediately started fantasizing about big installations and things that were bigger than myself. And it definitely became bigger than ourselves. So I'll start talking about our kind of primal feature installation. That will be the first thing that you'll see when you come into the expo. That is going live the 30th of October in Fuse, Amsterdam. And it will be this. This is my sketch of a construction, which would be like a pergola, like a tuinhuisje kind of a bamboo construction, from which we see that there is a whole tub of earth with the map of the earth. And from that rises a web with little elements like a collage of shell moments, shell crime moments. And the idea of this installation from the beginning, like why is it so important that it rises above, and we have literally like a tub of earth, like 1,500 kilo of earth at the bottom of it, is because I wanted to talk about something that in the climate movement, so much focus is going to the science of these particles in the air, this CO2. And to me, when I think about that, I think about the colonization of the atmosphere. But before the colonization of the atmosphere, there was the colonization of the land. And through the violence that was on the land, both in pollution, but also in poisoning of people's lives, of direct military conflicts, I wanted to, in this web, kind of play with that the higher the elements were, the closer it was with the colonization of the sky, so pollution items. But the lower it was to the bottom, we would have things like how they were involved with wars in Bolivia in 1932, or how they were involved with labor abuse or racism. So that was the idea of the as below, so above concept, that you would walk into the expo and see the world as a crime scene. A crime scene particularly made by Shell in so many different layers. And one final note that I will say about this, this is, by the way, when the Earth arrived last week, is that I'm both an activist, I work with film, I work with songs. The thing that was really nice about making an installation and making it so tangible was literally this, like getting your hands in the earth, and kind of, I was walking to this week with the earth, some of the earth, this is just a teeny tiny bit of it, and it was so heavy, but it was feeling like I was carrying a little bit of earth, a little bit of her with me, that in the end, when I die someday, I'm going to return to her and she's going to carry me again. And it was this physicality of it, like that's what I really hope of the expo as well. There's, as climate activists, we're reading on the screen. There's, in the age of information, there's so much available, but to make it tangible, to make it feel what we're literally doing to the earth and how we're part of it, I hope you're going to feel that when you're in the expo, surrounded with the different pieces that we'll be talking about. So just wanted to say that as an opening, and hand it over.
So for my part, I really see our installation as Below So Above as a report of the crimes that have been committed to the earth. These reports are made by earth citizens themselves, and they really show that Shell really reproduced inequalities that already exist on earth. They managed to do so, to reproduce these inequalities underground, on the soil, but also on the bodies of people who led these movements, which was, of course, not that surprising, but it was a good confirmation that these processes that they use as an oil company are not so random, that they are based on practices that have long have been done before their own existence. So the centuries of colonial practices and mercantile practices have allowed Shell to pay their way into our lives via pollution, via entering the land of people, even their garden, paying their way into public spaces through compensation, but also building infrastructures that would reproduce these same inequalities. So, as an example, we can talk about South Africa, where they would go on with the regime that was going on earlier, as known as apartheid, and build houses for workers according to their skin color, which is a reproduction that we felt the need to show, to visualize, and it's really important to shed some light on the work done by activism and the struggles they had suffered that pushed them to show and protest against what has been done by Shell. In our process, what has been really interesting also, I'm really grateful to be an artist and in this exhibition to show you the difficulties that activists went through to expose Shell. And it is interesting also to use our hands, as Shihiro said, to use our hands to put them in the earth, to do some collages, to really give more importance to these reports from other art citizens who also used their hands by making banners, slogans, and visual content to raise awareness about what was happening on their own land. And we hope to spread some inspiring content into your mind when you join us next week at the opening.
So you also wanted to say something about how we draw the map, I think, about the borders.
For what is really good what was really good with creating this map is the absence of borders, because what is important to underline is that if borders exist in real life, they don't. We think borders exist in real life, but do they really? The impact of Shell, it doesn't see the borders of your skin, of the country. They have an influence in the Netherlands, in Ireland, in Canada, in South Africa. So it was really important for us to highlight how these concepts need to be thought about.
Yeah, and also that certain borders, like in Nigeria or in Iraq, they're such colonial borders. They were conceptualized by colonialism. And since all of the expo is being produced in a decolonial lens, this was really important to just outline the continents. And also really, most people have heard a little bit about Nigeria or about Groningen wrongdoings. But here in the web, we immediately show something systemic. We show Nicaragua, we show Indonesia, where it all started. So by immediately exposing not the symptom, but the system was something that the tone of voice for the opening. So while our installation was kind of system-oriented, we also wanted to let people speak for themselves. And so there are audio stories in the expo, and we'll be listening to one of them. This is a story that was shared by Friday. Friday from Nigeria, from Port Harcourt. And Once Upon a Place is the series of the audio stories, and we'll hear about Ogoniland, his take. Also want to note that right now in Nigeria there's lots of protests going on against police violence. And so also really noting that the struggle is ongoing. But let's take a listen.
My name is Mbani Friday Barilule. I was born and grew up in Ogoniland. Ogoni environment was the best place to live, to spend life, before the discovery of oil in the area. Why do I say so? It is because of the beauty of the environment, especially the plants, different species of it, the species of animals in the region, the source of livelihood were easily accessible, available, and affordable without much suffering. Life was so easy and enjoyable. When you talk about water, water was accessible, available, and clean one, fit for drinking, bathing, cooking, for domestic purpose and agricultural use. And life was so enjoyable not until 1958, when oil was discovered in Ogoniland and Shell started operation. We thought it was a blessing. We thought it's going to benefit the host community. So we welcome Shell. In fact, that was the first time we have seen foreigners, white men. So we celebrated and embraced them. But the wicked people Shell took us for granted, and even the local content was not given to us, the host community. Until 1990, when Ken Salonwiwa came up boldly and owned the Ogoni struggle, he started sensitizing, educating us that Shell did not observe environmental impact assessment, that Shell did not make provision for local content, and no community benefit, that Shell came to destroy and to kill our environment. So, Ken Salonwiwa went further to establish the movement of the survivor of Ogoni people, MOSOP, in 1990. The Ogoni rose to international attention after a massive public protest campaigning against Shell, led by MOSOP. Presently, you will not believe that such an environment where people were rushing to, where people were enjoying their life, has becoming a desert. Why do I call it a desert? It was because of the pains, the communal crisis, pollution, contamination, gas flaming, oil spillage, corruption, sickness, and death rate in the region. The aquifer has been contaminated, and report released by UNEP after conducting environmental assessment on Ogoni land show that Ogoni people has been consuming 900 times benzene in water. This is the report of UNEP. Death rate increased on a daily basis. In those days, before the extraction of oil, our grandmother, our grandfather has been living 100 years and above. Today, the vice is the case, where you see a 40 years person in Ogoni land and he is the king or elder of the community. Life expectancy is becoming very short. Our beautiful species of plants and animals have gone on extinction. Pollution has stolen away our culture, animal and vegetation. In 2006, reports show that Ogoni residents are constantly inhaling black soot, a tiny particulate, which are inimical to health. Ogoni people has nowhere to run to, and as such, people die on daily basis. Burial ceremony is the major function in Ogoni now. The situation is getting worse every day because there is no electricity, there is no good roads, no hospital, schools are not well equipped, police station is just one, and no portable source of drinking water. It appeared to me as it's a state policy to kill the entire Ogoni people. Having faced a devastating effect of the activities of share, and we also face discrimination from Nigeria government, which favor the oil company. We continue to experience crisis, community crisis, fueling by the oil company. In 2016, Laken Development Foundation was established, having observed that the large percentage of the Ogoni people cannot afford $1 per day for living. Laken Development Foundation is a grassroots organization that works in Ogoni land to raise young climate activists, advocate for livelihood for fishermen and farmers that have lost their livelihood, and campaigning against fossil fuel as we call for renewable energy in the regions. One thing I've learned since I started activism is that we must get victory and justice. It may take time, but victory is sure. And when community is involved, united, then justice is sure. Again, it's good to be good. Stand for right, call for right, speak for right, and always stand for the oppressed. Another key thing I've learned is education is a key. Educating the grassroots people to know the implication of an issue, help them to buy in the struggle. This is what Ken Saro-Wiwa did before carrying out his struggle. He went to community by community and educate them, the stakeholder, to send their sons and daughters to school, that tomorrow they will become the leaders of Ogoni. And they will champion the Ogoni struggle, and everything will be easy.
That was his positive note. Everything will be easy. And just before we go into the next song, I'd like to say one more thing. That initially we thought the audio stories would be 3 to 5 minutes. And the first version I got from Friday was around 50 minutes. This is now 7 minutes. And we didn't edit anything. Like, we really wanted the stories raw. The only restraint we gave was time and a clarification question if something was unclear. And I think it's so beautiful, like listening to this story, you hear life is good, you know, when there's clean water. And yeah, I'm just really happy that we have in the expo people speaking from their own voice, and also really with the recognition that nature doesn't begin and nature doesn't end. It's endless and it's in ourselves. So when we talk about the story of Shell, it's not just about pollution in there, but it's about poisoning everything. You know, our bodies, our environment, our work, our relations. And so in light of that, we wanted to have another song midway you heard Ken Saro-Wiwa being named as the leader of the MOSOP, the Movement for Survival of Ogoni People in the 90s. He was murdered, and over here you see 4 of his quotes. He wrote a book, Silence Would Be Treason, while he was imprisoned. This was also due to Shell influence, kind of not liking all of the uprisings and saying to the government there, do something about it. And I'll read one quote. We may have to bend the laws. After all, the laws are bent to drive us into extinction. Best wishes for the new year. From me, Ken. He wrote this to an Irish woman involved with the solidarity. And we like to sing this song as a tribute to Ken Saro-Wiwa, from who we still have a lot to learn, and who, by remembering, still lives in us. And they tried to bury him, but didn't realize he's a seed and bears new fruit in new movement.
Once upon this planet Earth lived a man of humble birth, preaching love and freedom for his fellow man. He was dreaming of a day peace would come to earth to stay, and he spread this message all across the land.
Turn the other cheek, he'd plead. Love thy neighbor was his creed. Pain and humiliation, death he did not dread. With his Bible at his side, love thy neighbor as. It is hard to think that this great man is dead.
For the murders never cease. Are they men or are they beasts? What do they ever hope to seize and gain?
Will my country fall, stand or fall? Is it too late for us all? And did Ken Saro-Wiwa just die in vain?
'Cause he'd seen the mountaintop,
and he knew he could not stop.
Always living with the threat of death ahead.
Folks, you'd better stop and think,
'cause we're all heading for that brink. What would happen now
that Ken is dead? So I think with the expo, besides being super inspired by a century of resistance, I also wanted to make space for mourning. Actually feeling, because we're being so taught not to feel, but all of this alienation from our emotional intelligence is not helping us to show up as full, embodied healers in this time of breakdown. So I hope you felt something. I hope you felt something somewhere in your body, somewhere in your gut. And I just want to acknowledge that while we sang this tribute to Ken, he was part of the Ogoni 9, of 9 leaders being murdered. And they were part of a movement where thousands of people were murdered, and many more thousands were turned into refugees and had to flee the land. So don't want to over-individualize, but through his writing, we're actually able to remember. And I think all of this expo is about memory. So instead of keeping the Q&A till the total end, we wanted to have a little break here and be available for some in-between questions that might already show up. So, looking at you, lovely people, because we have people in the room. Yes, in the front.
Yeah, I have one question. You mentioned the role of the Nigerian government.
Abacha.
Yeah, Shell is a Dutch company. What can and should the Dutch government be doing?
Okay, so to repeat the question, we mentioned the murders in Nigeria, and how is this related to the Dutch government, you asked? Or what is their...
Also in general, what's the responsibility of the Dutch government when it comes to Shell?
Yeah. Well, that's a big question. I could definitely say a few words, and maybe you want to pick up. Because actually what we found, or what I found, maybe other people knew it, but I don't hear it around in the movement, is that Shell, when it was founded in 1890, it was already founded with 2 people of Tweede Kamer, of the government, in the bestuur. So it had a colonel from the KNIL, from the colonial military in Indonesia. It had the director of the Kamer van Koophandel and 2 men from the Tweede Kamer as part of its founding bestuur board. And ever since, we see so much entanglement of the Dutch government, both in Groningen, which we will be hearing about a little bit more tomorrow in Archive and Activism panel. The fact that many politicians who went on to work for Shell later. Colijn in early 20th century was a Shell man and a politician. We have Gerrit Zalm from the VVD, but also a couple of PvdA'ers. I'll speak about it more tomorrow. But this is a lot of Dutch government involved in Shell. And also, well, what they're doing are just crimes, like murder is murder. So they could be trying, they could hold them accountable for their involvement. But the reason that that's not happening, I think, is because the lines between Shell and government is too blurred at the moment and since the beginning of Shell.
So on that, I would say that I think the fact that Nigerian farmers and victims of the actions of Shell on in their country, the fact that the justice in The Hague is listening to them, hearing their trials and finding solutions in their way for them, that's also part of the involvement of the Dutch government, a sort of acknowledgement, I would say, of what has happened and what needs to be corrected, needs to be mourned, acknowledged, to give peace to people who ask for justice.
Is there another question midway? We'll come back to more questions in the end as well, but it'd be nice to address what's in the room. Yes?
How did the interviews with the Ogoni people emerge?
How did the interviews with the Ogoni people emerge? The person who's telling the story? Yeah, I'm happy you asked that. Friday, our Friday for Future, Friday actually reached out to us to us, Shall Must Fall, when we were organizing for mass civil disobedience, and we made a song, Shall Must Fall, and reached out to all sorts of Nigerian groups as well, saying like, hey, would you like to share the song? And he was like, oh, this is amazing. I'm going to share with all my friends. And if you do an action, I want to do an action here too. So that's how we got to know him. And he speaks in his story about the Leke Foundation. So that's how he is active, both against oil and against coal. It's another plague in Nigeria. And so he's also really an activist. And that was something that spoke to me. We weren't too involved in casting the voices, but we wanted them to be activist voices, not just people who happened to live there and maybe had an academic understanding, although he is really working in the environmental sector. So, good question. I'm looking at the time and probably have to go to the next part, but we'll come back to Q&A later. We'll discuss one more installation, and then also don't want to give away everything because you're better off seeing it for yourself. But this is one more installation. You want me to go first, or?
Well, I can.
As you wish. Me? Yeah, okay. So I will start with, again, a little bit of the concept. This was the wall of ppm. From the beginning. And this is, again, talking that in mainstream climate discourse, we talk about the line of ppm, we talk about graphics and about the greenhouse gases. So when I say ppm, I mean CO2 levels going up, and that is measured in parts per million, ppm. And you see a little bit of the graph there. We started in 80 when it was 291. We're now in 2020, and it's at 411, I believe. And it should have never gone beyond 350. But staying in that graphic, in that timeline, so the first installation is all about space, a spatial systemic orientation. This is a time orientation. I just didn't want to look, again, only at the particles, but I wanted to look at a different ppm, and that's the people-powered movement. That has also been rising, and like a heartbeat that is going wider and wider and out of control, is something that is, increasing. So most of the first resistance that we found against Shell were in the 20s in Indonesia. But it didn't really find more sources until the 40s in the decolonial struggle away from Dutch colonization. And so if you look at the more sources, like in the 90s, it's already so much sources. And in the 2000s, even more sources. And in 2010s, it's just like resistance everywhere. So this is the rising line of people-powered movement. And it will be two big banners under which you will walk in between under the heartbeat. And the heartbeat signals both the aliveness of the earth, so like this abstraction of CO2 coming back to life, but also the people-powered movement. It is a pulse, and we're part of it. And we're inviting you to walk under it and look at all the other pieces through that lens of like, what year was it? How many ppm was it that year?
So it was really interesting to trace Shell's history through that lens of people-powered movement and, both people-powered movement and the growth of parts per million, in the sense that it enabled us to erase the division that we usually see between science and people's lives. In our daily lives, we can hear in the news what the IPCC says about the danger of the presence of parts per million in our air, but we rarely see a link made in the media between these. What are the actions we can really bring to the table to reduce this rise? So it has been really, really humbling to dig through time, through all these actions made by people, and to make it possible for you to see all the things that have been done during this whole century that seem not to happen but are happening. We see a rising for a few years now of green ecological movements, and it is really important for us to go back in time and show that it has always been there, that people have actually needed to fight for their rights, for the rights of their lands, for the rights of their air, of their community. And I hope that the message, you as a visitor and as the audience tonight, that the message you can take is that if we stop, Shell will not stop. They can go on, they can continue business as usual, and the parts per million, if Shell continues, will not stop. So that's why we need people-powered movement.
Exactly. Also, I'm so happy you said that. Like, it's not just an energy crisis, like it's a power struggle. And I think that heartbeat in between also really speaks to the power struggle. Like everywhere in the expo, it's power struggle, power struggle, power struggle. And they have the capital and the violence. And it's important for us to analyze that. Like, how did they get that capital? How did they get that license to violence? But we have the masses, and it's important to see the other masses that have been there before us, because they contain so many lessons in our ancestor and resistance. And also just like using the banners, like this way we make banners, you know, as activists we make banners like this all the time. So I think also in some ways we went beyond the tools of activism, but in a lot of ways we stayed within that kind of way of expression, using lots of carton, using banners, using things that even though we had the space of an expo to get a little bit more creative, they were still our tools or our main muscle. So now we're gonna go really, really fast. So we're just gonna run through the 15 things of the expo. So let's go.
Okay, the first one, as below, so above, testimonies of crimes on Earth.
The second one, hangry for change. It's like a web of red lines and asking you what makes you angry for change.
Third one is silence would be treason, as you can see here. It's a space for remembering, learning, and getting inspired.
About Nigeria in particular.
Yes.
And then fourth, we have a whole wall of posters from the anti-apartheid struggle, Solidarity in the Netherlands. You'll go back to the 80s and 90s of seeing what kind of way they articulated their protest against Shell.
The PPM timeline will give you an eye on the people-powered movement that is hidden behind the rise of parts per million.
Yes, and then we have Once Upon a Place. It will be a little house in the middle of the expo where you can listen to the audio stories and see some videos of actions.
The book table versus Shell space is holding Shell accountable in words and images.
And then 8, we have iconic actions, a little bit of the international actions from Philippines to the North Sea, stopping big drilling sites. It's really visual.
In In Space 9, you can learn about Noord-Nederland through Milieudefensie, Groninger Bodembeweging, who will show you the treatment that Shell gives to its own homeland.
And then we have a little wall in which we, through visuals, explore Shell Must Fall campaign, both in 2019, when it got started, and in 2020, when more and more cities around Europe started joining in.
With oil kills, you will see a banner coming straight from a Code Road / Shell Must Fall action.
With Shell Summons, we'll show you how people who were part of the over 17,000 co-plaintiffs of one of the court cases we heard about earlier showed up at Shell HQ with the summons.
On the Justice Corner, you will find clothing with a message for activists and activism.
And Dressed for Action is going to be a combination of our masterpiece, Shall We Stop? That is part of the Nopulence fashion show with Ariel Freeman Hopeless. Yeah. Modeling the showpiece, but also other relics of action of T-shirts and sweaters. And of course, next to the clothing, we'll show you the pictures of them in action. And then finally...
we give you the opportunity to do it yourself through merchandise.
So get your own T-shirt and be an expression of resistance in your everyday. And that's just a sneak preview of the expo space. Yay! So finally, we'll have some more space for questions, because this is, of course, stirring in the pot of all this resistance. Who would like to ask anything else that's on your mind?
Don't be shy.
We can talk about this for hours, but it's nice to just connect with what's actually front and center for you, because we're all entering this space in a different way. Yes?
Yeah, I'm wondering, what do you think that Shell is feeling, thinking, talking about all of this resistance and people standing up on the inside?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you think Shell is feeling about all of this on the inside? We can only take a stab at it. Would you like to go first? Take a stab at it. It's like we can only guess.
Well, I guess they are finally starting to take people seriously, people's demands seriously, and thinking that art is a way to get through them, to get through the wrongdoings they have done in the past, and to expose them and hold them accountable from now on. That's how I see it.
I don't think Shell itself is engaging or impressed, but I might add to what's happening in cultural institutions that activism like fossil-free culture, who we'll hear more from tomorrow, is actually able to get institutions like Van Gogh Museum or Concertgebouw to stop taking money from Shell. So it's definitely showing that activism itself has a huge implication in the culture of the Netherlands, where there's been such a long silence of just having Shell buying its good publicity, both in the media and in cultural institutions and in education, which we'll hear more about in the panel of Reclaiming Culture, because they've really done an excessive job of getting the media and the education just paid. What Shell would think about this expo, I really don't know. What I do really like is that our expo is situated in the NDSM right next to the Shell lab. So we are really treading on their territory. And as you take the ferry from the central station, you are passing their old big building, die Hoge Toren daar zo. And we even encountered some pictures of like protests that were at this building, like way back in the day. And I heard from the people who were fighting the anti-apartheid struggle that back then there were quite some Shell employees involved with the struggle against apartheid. So for me, I wish we could see some more of that, because so far I haven't been seeing people at Shell with a conscience that are racing, like making it impossible for Shell to operate. They are now going to be able to, with Corona, probably doing mass layoffs. So I don't know how. There was recently a study that showed that in England, I believe, that a lot of oil and gas workers, I don't know, I don't want to say the wrong percentages, but somewhere between 40 and 50 are actually quite keen of working in another industry, like the renewable energy industry. Also, it showed that the majority, again, I don't want to misquote, but somewhere around 80, hadn't really heard about just transitions. So the idea that ending this horrible industry of mass destruction would have to be done in a just way for workers. So there's a lot of territory to be gained there. I think what is most exciting is to see that the cultural spaces are not caving, that they're not thinking, oh, this is too heavy, this is too complicated, this is too polarizing. The fact that we've had this space at Fuse, the fact that we're getting asks from cultural institutions to talk about our expo, not just here at BAC, which is amazing, but also in other festivals to speak about this expo. That does show to me that even though Shell is not changing, something in culture is breaking through. Sorry, that was a very long answer, but I get very enthusiastic. Maybe a final question? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I thought that was a hand, but was it a stretch? No. The person here in front that is now looking backwards. I thought you had a hand. No? No? Okay, no hand. Then somebody else, yeah.
Are there any plans for getting the expo out there after being done in Fuse? So making it a traveling expo?
Yeah. Are there any plans beyond Fuse and NDSM where we will open the 30th of October?
Well, yeah, we are opening next week to Fuse at NDSM for a month, maybe more.
2 months?
Yeah.
We just heard this week that we'll be able to stay there for another month.
And we might have opportunities to expose in other places in Amsterdam, hopefully also in other countries, to spread the word and probably inspire people to push the movement for their national oil companies.
I can say we reached out to a couple of places, and we've had another place that we can't name yet because we don't know if it's going to go through, but we've had another place in Amsterdam that said, oh, we would be interested for next year, but we need to sit at a table with them to see, is it all going to go through? And also, we never know what Corona situation is going to be in the next coming months. But for now, we have an extension of the expo until end of December, and we have prospect of another place next year. Yeah. So that's good. Yeah. Yeah. One more. Okay, we'll have one more question. Yes. Here.
So you basically focus on the activism and resistance in Nigeria, right? Or also in the Netherlands? Because of course there's, especially in the 80s and 90s, there's been a lot of activism in the Netherlands as well. But you focus on there because, if I understand it correctly, what you also try to say is like from the particles in the ground, it has been colonized to the particles in the air. it's more you focus on the local struggle?
So the question is, I'm going to repeat it for the audio as well. The question is about if the expo is more focused on Nigeria and less so on the Netherlands or the local resistance because of the decolonial lens of it. I would say yes and no, because we have a lot of the Netherlands in there. But for tonight, when we present it, the entry door, the door through which you come into the space, is this whole map in which we have stories from Nicaragua and Bolivia and Argentina and places that you have probably heard less about of shell misdoing. And then there's a gateway through Nigeria, but then it opens up and we have a whole long section around the Netherlands from different groups, like Groninger Bodembeweging, Milieudefensie, Greenpeace, Code Rood, Shell Must Fall, Fossil Free Culture, Fossielvrij Reclame, Extinction Rebellion. So there's a whole lot of Dutch stuff. You want to add?
Well, we have things. We have different pieces, as Chihiro said, that come from everywhere in the world, everywhere where Shell is active. I can also cite the Shell Must Fall, Shell to Sea group in Ireland, which I never heard about before. So yeah, you're gonna discover a lot, relearn a lot about the Netherlands. I can understand that the colonial part maybe feels a bit that like it's more from abroad, but I see it as also being a colonial behavior in the Netherlands too, because how is it to treat your own land like this, just taking advantage of it, disturbing your own people's lives? I also see it as colonial behavior.
Yeah, on the book table is also going to be the Gaskolonie, which is about Groningen and the history of Groningen. And the book is literally called Gas Colony, so it cannot be more literal in kind of seeing the relationship of, extractivism is colonialism, because you're not working for balance, you're working for dispossession and profit. So that theme is going to be, I think, pretty big. And I think one of the most exciting, but I've kept this for tomorrow for the archive and activism panel, is talking about Indonesia and Curaçao, because they're really touching on our Dutch colonialism. And there's going to be a fair amount of it. You're going to see pictures from 1916 of Indonesia, from Palembang. And I just hope just how that's going to hit the gut of really feeling this history. But yeah, that's going to be more for tomorrow.
Also, I just wanted to add that since with the first installation, which is as below so above, with the map not having any border, that's hopefully the understanding that visitors, so you, will get by seeing all these pieces of content put together, that it's a common struggle that we put together. We gathered information from different people who did not necessarily have a relationship with other activist groups, or did. You can see at the exhibition that Irish people really supported the Ogoni struggle. So probably you're going to get inspired and get more interested in getting to know other activist groups and about the history of the Netherlands.
Yeah, and for everybody who's already active in the Netherlands, I think it's also going to be really beautiful to see your ancestors in resistance. Like, see that you weren't the first, that you're carried, that there are people who are proud of you, that there are people who that you also kind of belong to, in a sense, that you're part of something greater. Like, I definitely felt throughout the expo like we're building something that is greater than ourselves. And I think to be successful in this struggle for climate justice, we need to recognize that the climate crisis is a colonial crisis with decolonial solutions. and that in order to be successful, we need to be intergenerational. So we need to be able to work with our elders, with the youth. We probably fall a little bit in between. But there are people coming after us, and there are people who were there before us. And if we manage to harvest the learnings, the insight, the strategy, the pride, the courage of all these different elements of generations, I think we'll be so much stronger. So that is my theory of change. But speaking to the expo as an creative expression, I'm just gonna hope it connects with you in your gut. Like, it's, even though there's a lot of knowledge in there, I want it to hit you differently than when you sit behind your computer and just read an article and sometimes just feel like you're drowning in it. I hope it kind of is more uplifting you in that way. How do you hope it will make people feel?
I hope the same, that you no, that you will get out of this exhibition feeling powerful. It's called people-powered movement. We are all people. We all have this power of speaking our minds and speaking for our communities, for our land, for what is around us and needs to be supported. So I really hope that you go home thinking, I have as much power as Shell does. It's just that I have to share it with my community around. And I haven't been taught to do it, but now I get small pieces that show me that it is possible. It might take time, but the timeline will show you that it's not a limit. It's just a question of gathering information and gathering our forces.
Yeah. And like, we know that, you know, just like when there's workshops on decolonialism, like it's never a workshop that's gonna, you know, turn the switch. It's lifelong learning. And this expo is just a teeny tiny grain of sand. But I've been really interested, like Anna and I have been having lots of conversations each time when we're like working with paper mache or like the wires and the carton and blah. And I hear about her conversations with her friends who are like, what? And every time, you know, something that is in that web, it's like from the 15 different countries or so, you know, like in South Africa, there was a little collage bit about where Shell is bragging that they have 25 luxury toilets for whites only. And it's like these type of snippets that it's only an element of, you know, like a paper that or a report that is super thick. But by finding these treasures of like looking like, this is what's wrong with Shell, that's what's wrong with Shell, from military violence to funding police to poisoning, you know, the water of... Water, yeah. So I already see how it's impacting your friends.
Yeah. I can really see in their eyes when I tell the stories that I've read that they don't want to believe it, but they feel like now is the time to believe it and actually do something about it. And I'm grateful to see that in their eyes, to hear that they feel that the change is needed and that hopefully it's growing bigger. So with our little pieces of earth, I hope that Earth will be better protected from now on.
Cool. I think... Oh, yes, please.
What are you going to do with the Earth after the expo?
We're still contemplating that. Yeah. Yeah. Good question. No, I think it has to be part of a bigger kind of both ritual and action. Like, I think combining ritual and direct action would be nice. But more than that, I cannot say about it. It's 1,500 kilo. So we got it delivered with a hijskraan in the NDSM Werf. This is just a teeny tiny bit of it. The rest will be in the tub. So we know we will not just dump it. We know we will reuse and it's also kind of referring, if you haven't seen it yet, but look up the video from Elina, from Je Moeder, where she has shells that she is like crashing with like a hammer of like, and she's using the shell bits and putting it in the earth, like compost, composting shell. So yeah, that is a very lengthy way of saying, I don't know, but we're inspired to do something creative. And I think this year has really taught us a lot about not being too looking far into a determined plan, but kind of be adaptable and see where it goes. So I think sometime next year we'll surprise you with a nice headline.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. Yeah, so about this picture is really, well, this one is from the band Sound of Climate Justice. You might recognize a few faces. But the one on the left is from 1996. And it's the same building, the same disc of the HQ of Shell. And you see actually Milieudefensie in front of Shell HQ with Ken Saro-Wiwa. So this is really just a few months after he was murdered. And I think we opened with it. We're not the first one to fight this monster. And I think we'll also close with it to kind of be humbled and be proud that we have such long history, a century of history of resistance that can also nourish us and charge our battery to be connected and move with them and take the next step. They have paved the way and they've taken it as far as they could go, and now is our turn to take it as far as we can go. So with that said, I'd like to invite Florian back to the stage. It's such a pleasure to be playing live music with you. It's almost like we're a society with like a culture and there's something to share. So with lots of gratitude, we're closing the night and playing a new song that already feels old. You can sing along, but you don't have to. Do you remember 300,000 Ogoni people on the streets in 93 to end the ecological war waged by the corporate greed? 3,000 oil spills, no reparation, and came the military. Crops were destroyed and petrodollars, but killing go police.
We block the streets, disrupt our industries. Oh, can you hear our call? Shell must fall. Oh, Shell must fall. Ogoni people not forgotten, Shell must fall. They raped and tortured and murdered for oil. Ogoni people not forgotten, Shell must fall. Just 3 miles from indigenous land sits a toxic waste pool. Heavy metals, radioactive trash. Fracking dumps are lethal. With 2 spills a day, you know you can. How can they still operate? Mapuche people filed a legal case. How long must they wait? We block the streets, disrupt our industry. Oh, can you hear our call? Shell must fall. Oh, Shell must fall. Mapuche people not forgotten, Shell must fall. They poison the water, threaten health of all. Mapuche people not forgotten, Shell must fall.
In the 60s, it was predicted that it would make the land shake. Now 60 years later, destruction has caused over 1,000 earthquakes. They tore the land, cracks in the homes, and then the people too. Still, bureaucracy, state complicity protects the fossil fuels.
We block the streets, demand accountability. Oh, can you hear our call? Shell must fall. Oh, Shell must fall. Groningen is not forgotten. Shell must fall. Denying damages, only their greed is royal. Groningen is not forgotten. Shell must fall. Shell must fall. Oh, Shell must fall. Human rights are violated. Shell must fall. Shell must fall. Oh, Shell must fall. Climate crimes around the world. Oh, Shell must fall. Shell must fall. Oh, Shell must fall. Our goal is clear and we are unstoppable. 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 Our goal is clear and we are unstoppable.
Whew. As always a pleasure. Florian Wolf. Voor ons vanavond met heerlijke tunes en zoveel gevoel en zoveel spirit. Hartstikke bedankt. Bedankt aan jullie, iedereen in de zaal, die ook echt het zo fijn maakt om samen te delen. Bedankt mensen die nu kijken en geïnspireerd zijn misschien om naar de expo te komen. Dank ook aan de makers van deze jurk die we tentoonstellen. Stephanie Wels en David Pronker. Eerder genoemd model Ariel Freeman Hopeless. En natuurlijk Anna, Bisila en ik. Very happy. Thank you so much. And thank you, Noor. It's been such a pleasure to work together side by side. Check in with you. Thank you. Dat is lekker, hè, de muziek. Wanneer was de laatste keer dat je live muziek hebt gehoord? Veel te lang geleden, ja, dat vond ik ook. Het is zo heerlijk om met je te spelen, Florian. Ja, moeten we vaker doen. Shell must fall, a shell must fall. A forgotten shell must fall. They poison the water that didn't help evolve. Mapuche people, not forgotten shell. Shell must fall, oh, shell must fall. People not forgotten, shell must fall. They poison the water, threaten health of all. Mapuche people not forgotten, shell must fall.